back before you, the government, get any money. And we think it'll be $10 billion because it's going to be very difficult. It turns out they say now it's $20 billion. The Russians, that means we won't ever see our money, and you're going to be taking our resources, you're going to be making it, and we won't. And so they then basically pushed Shell out they brought in a new partner, Gazprom. And so in these circumstances, you have to be sensitive to the fact that the Russians treat this as their holy of holies. And if you look like you're doing something at their expense, you're going to court trouble. But I asked these oil companies executives, why are you doing this? You know you're going to get caught in this whipsaw sooner or later. And they say, well, look, where are we going to go? Okay, it's been suggested we go to Peru, and there's the shining path. If we have to deal with the shining path, we'd rather deal with the KGB and Gazprom. If those are our alternatives. And so God did not put oil in nice places, and we have to deal on that basis. And so they know it, and I think the Russians feel they can do it. And also in terms of gas, that what I argue in the book is that they also can control what's going on in Central Asia, and Putin has handled that very well. Here he really is the man from Gazprom. If somebody else, Dick Cheney, goes to Kazakhstan and tries to tell the people in Kazakhstan that they should support the building of a bypass gas pipeline under the Caspian Sea to avoid Russia, Putin flies there the next day. You don't want to do that. And that's a pie in the sky. You're going to put money in that. It'll never come to reality. We're here. We're real. Stick with us. And basically sabotages it.
Alexei Miller, the CEO of Gazprom, has said again in a recent interview just this last week, part of his advice is we welcome the investment. You just better invest with a state company, and you better do it at a percentage that is acceptable. And that's probably a moving target. Next question. Yes, please.
Wait for the microphone.
Microphone, please.
Let me just say while the microphone is going there, what is happening is more and more Western firms are going there as service companies. When we went out to Siberia, what we found was that Schlumberger, the French-American company, was there, and Halliburton, Dick Cheney's old company. They're the ones who are actually doing the drilling. And there, you take your commission, you don't develop an equity, and the Russians are happy with that. But the rest, you're absolutely right. They get nervous if you develop an equity interest.
In that way, they can get the technology, but not give up anything in terms of their nationalistic interest in preserving
precisely
the wealth that comes from their natural resources. Okay.
Yeah, John Stremlaw, Marshall, thanks for a great talk. Could you reflect a little bit on the triangle of Russia, China, and the U.S.? And are you and Merrill going to have something to say on that soon?
Yeah, I should say my wife is a China specialist. That's a fascinating triangle, too. The Russians are very nervous because, as we've just heard, as Wayne indicated, there's more and more movement to develop energy in East Siberia, which is, of course, just in the maritime provinces, and that's where there are lots of Chinese. More than that, the Russians from that part of the area, Vladivostok, are moving to the west. On top of that, if that weren't enough, the biggest problem that Putin probably has to deal with, or Medvedev, the new president, is the fact that the Russian population is shrinking. It's falling 700,000 people a year. That's not unique. It's happening in Europe to many countries as well. But it means that when there are, say, 6 to 8 million Russians in Siberia and in the maritime provinces on the Pacific, and there are 30, 40 million Chinese eager to cross the border, that makes them nervous. And you go there, we've traveled a lot there, and what you find is the construction crews are more and more Chinese. You go into the markets, you find the Chinese are the ones selling their goods from across the border. This causes a lot of local racism, anger, xenophobia. Indeed, that there are laws now pushing out the foreigners, not just the Chinese, but the Central Asians as well from some of their markets. But it's a problem, and it creates a tension. At the same time, the two of them, Russia and China, have linked up together in joining the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, which also brings in the Central Asian, against the United States. And this, I think, is a shortcoming of our foreign policy, that we've done things that have brought them together in a way that normally they wouldn't be together, because naturally, if left to their own, there would be problems. The Chinese did help the Russians in the sense that they came in and bought lots of military equipment. But this provoked a big debate in Russia. It was as if, Lenin was supposed to have said it, we don't know if he did, that the capitalists will sell us the rope that will hang them. And so what the Russians were saying, we're selling the military equipment that may come back to haunt us. The Chinese say, no, we're going to use it against Taiwan, but they've come together this way. So there is a lot of natural rivalry that's there that could indeed cause lots of problems.
But in the context of political interaction and engagement and even rivalry, this makes sense. They're concerned. Russians have to be concerned about this. This goes back 1,000 years of concern about what's coming out of the East. On the other hand, from a purely commercial point of view, if you look at it as Russia Inc. or Gazprom Inc. or Rosneft, you said this week in another interview with Russians media that there's also India. I mean, from a commercial standpoint, China and India are the two other enormously growing economies. So you've got a commercial interest and a political interest, and the question is, how do those tie together?
Well, in the case of India at this point, although India's become much closer to us recently, but before Russia and India were pretty close. Again, but partly as a play against China. Now this is, again, India's part of this thing, but there is another aspect which is drawing both the Russians and the Chinese together, and that's the Islamic thing. Because the Chinese have a problem in Xinjiang, which is in northwest China. There've been violence, terrorism there, because there's a very strong Islamic Chinese group, the Uyghurs, that are there, and they want independence. And we were there 2 years ago in Urumqi, which is one place where the Chinese actually produce some petroleum. And they were about to mark the celebration of the incorporation of Xinjiang into China, which the Uyghurs were not happy about. And there were soldiers, Chinese soldiers, parading in the markets, in the streets with open bayonets, just because they were worried about this thing. So the Russians are concerned about this. In Kazakhstan, they're worried about this. Uzbekistan, they're worried about, and that was also partly the thing that the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement was to draw them together. And to some extent, to the extent that we get back in there, we say, this is something we have a mutual interest in this. So there are areas where they indeed have mutual concerns, but underlying it, there is potential and historic, as you say, rivalry that on occasion has led to violence. The Russians, the Soviets, and the Chinese were shooting at each other in 1969.
In the back, please. And next we'll be here.
Thank you very much. Is the price of natural gas still subsidized in Russia? I mean, does it sell below, you might say, the market price in Western Europe?
Yeah.
And what is the outlook that natural gas prices inside of Russia will go up?
This has provoked a big debate in Russia, because one of the things that should happen, this is our natural gas, Russia's natural gas. There should be some benefit to the population. Are you going to charge world prices and push us out of the market? So for a long time, the price of petroleum as well, but especially natural gas, was heavily subsidized, or at least it did not meet what the world market price was. For example, they were selling natural gas to Germany at $150 a thousand cubic meters. Inside Russia, it was about $40, $50. And also, they were selling it at the same price to some of the former republics, Ukraine in particular. And that later set off a big battle with Ukraine, because the Russians said, you're no longer part of us, you should be paying world prices too. And that's when they began to cut back the flow of gas to Ukraine, which in turn cut it off to Russia. If